right, everyone. Welcome back to a very special second anniversary episode on David's Saturday Night Sit Back. And tonight, sitting back with me, I have Olivia MacDonell, who is a passionate advocate for intentional leadership, psychedelic integration, and the transformative power of Aftercare. As the founder of Tap Integration, the first software platform built for facilitators by facilitators, Olivia is at the forefront of developing groundbreaking technology designed to support individuals in their psychedelic integration journey. Tap Integration empowers facilitators to track clients' progress, provide tailored aftercare, and foster hands-on involvement in the technology, ensuring sustainable and meaningful change. With years of experience working in the psychedelic space, Olivia has become a trusted educator, integration specialist, and speaker on the intersection of psychedelics and personal growth. She is a frequent panelist at major industry events, including South by Southwest here in Austin, where she shares her expertise on the vital role of integration in psychedelic therapy. Olivia's work extends beyond the app, having co-hosted events and collaborated with thought leaders like Rick Doblin and Dr. Sisley. She also focused on building a supportive ecosystem for psychedelic facilitators, therapists, and their clients. Her commitment to accessibility and expanding the reach of psychedelic care has earned her recognition as a leader in this emerging field. Today, Olivia and I are going to talk about a world where every person truly knows themselves, connects deeply with others, and lives a life full of purpose through illuminating minds and building tribes. Olivia, thank you so much for being here, and welcome to your second episode on David's Saturday Night Sit Back.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be back. This is the one that we recorded earlier. The first one that we did is the podcast I always share when I want to share my story, because it was just my favorite experience of getting to tell my story, and the questions that you asked were so insightful. I think we talked about this last time, but it's challenging to find a podcaster that doesn't want to just go into the sensational, scandalous and really highlight that. So it felt very respectful and just inspiring for me to be able to share my story.
That is probably the biggest compliment you could pay me, so thank you so much. I know that when I started this, I try to think about ways so that everyone feels comfortable, because I want it to be a really fun experience. That's exactly what I want, is for people to leave that front door and be like, that was fun. I loved his questions. I loved the coffee. He had this fat little brown dog wandering around, taking a nap at our feet. So that is exactly what I'm aiming for, and I'm glad that it all worked out.
Little Thaddeus. He
Little
did not
Thaddeus.
just call you fat.
No, he's just very healthy.
You are not Thaddeus. You are Thaddeus.
Yes. He can't hear me. He's asleep on the porch, sunbathing like a lizard right now. Well, to kick things off, one thing we touched really lightly on in our first episode was just how important gratitude is. So I wanted to see, what is something that you are currently feeling grateful about?
Yes. I'm currently feeling thankful about the conference that we have coming up, and I'm bringing it up because I just had a call with one of my organizers 2 days ago, and we were talking about how we can weave in the nectar of life, that is gratitude, into the conference throughout the different segments, and just do little breaks periodically to get people to sit together. And there's different ways that you can work through gratitude with somebody else, where you just kind of go back and forth, and how it really starts to feed off of each other. So feeling really grateful about that, and getting to share that experience with other people, because it is such a life hack.
Yeah. So if we were doing that as we did it, you want to do it at the conference when I go next, and then you would go again, or what does that look like?
Yeah, exactly. So let's try to do it. We could do it just back and forth for a couple of minutes, where you can say, I like to say thank you, but you can say I'm grateful, or I'm thankful for, and just kind of noticing, like what you're feeling. You could say something about like what you're experiencing, extra points if you're able to weave in something that's challenging for you. But without just giving context, just going back and forth, we'll just start going in flow, and we can kind of feed off of each other's too, but we'll just kind of free flow and see how it goes.
Okay.
So if you like, I can start. Thank you so much for the delicious coffee that I'm drinking right now, and how it's energizing me.
Thank you for being here today. It's the gift of time, which is one of those commodities we don't get back once we spend it. So incredibly grateful for your company this afternoon.
Thank you so much for all the time and energy you've put into creating a space that can facilitate conversation.
Thank you for thank you for everything you're doing for community. I feel like that's just vital on planet Earth right now. So thank you.
Thank you for giving people a chance to tell their story.
Thank you for being so genuine with your story and transparent about it.
Thank you that in the spirit of transparency, thank you for all of the things that really irritated me today and pissed me off and got me here really dysregulated. And thank you that I'm just feeling so good now.
Yeah. I will say, thank you for my job because it is, as I mentioned pre-mic, we are having some challenges. But it is funds the ability to have us conversate this conversation right now.
Thank you for contrast and adversity.
Yeah. Hmm. Thank you for friends. I love friends.
Thank you for connection and the courage it takes to have connection.
This might be a little bit of a cop-out, but thank you for this weather. We've already been on 2 walks today because I was just like, dude, how can we not be outside more on a day like today?
Literally California weather.
Yeah.
Thank you, Texas, for your bipolar weather. Oh, thank you so much for the sunshine.
Thank you for the listeners I have in my life.
Yeah, thank you for presence and the presence that it takes to be a deep listener.
Yeah. Thank you for my mom. She's awesome. I'm missing her a little bit in this moment as we're doing this. I might have to call her as soon as you leave to see what she's up to.
Yes. Thank you for all the parents around the world, for all the dads that just celebrated Father's Day.
Thank you for this conversation because one of my hope is that we might shift some people's perspective. I love it when my perspective gets shifted. So
Thank you for the gift it is to be a shapeshifter and for the challenges that's brought in my life, but also the excitement and the ability to be able to be malleable and flexible and adaptable and to shift from different perspectives and energies.
thank you for wearing those earrings. They're very cool.
Yes. Thank you, Tippy Taylor. She sells them if anybody wants them. They are awesome. How are you feeling?
A little bit lighter.
You want to keep going?
Yeah, you want to do like 2 more each?
Let's do it.
Let's do 2 more each. Thank you for, I sort of did that one already. Thank you for technology. I love this world we're living in some ways.
Thank you thank you that it has never been easier for us to influence and impact technology through AI. Thank you that collectively we get to infuse our consciousness into AI and have a direct impact on what comes out of it.
Yeah. Thank you for thank you for the teenagers in my life. I mentioned to you that there's a group of guys at the gym that like to be they like to come up and talk to me, and I want to thank them for how honest they are about what's going on in their lives to someone who is essentially a stranger that has hopefully become a trusted friend that they can confide in. That has been the biggest gift that Texas has given me since I've been here is those boys. I love them to death.
Yes. Thank you so much for all of the people that have trusted me to take them through experiences and to be a sounding board for them. And thank you so much for the gift of communication and what it enables us to do. Thank you for the software of language.
Hmm. How do you feel?
I feel great.
Good.
Yes. I love gratitude.
Me too.
It's my favorite.
It's good, and it's like we were talking about on the phone. Life is moving so quick. It's so important to remember to take a moment and just think about the good stuff that's going on
Oh, yeah.
and the
Yeah.
bad stuff that you're grateful for.
Totally.
I have a very loaded question for you, and I'm not sure how you're going to feel about
Can't wait.
it. One thing I will say is that this afternoon we may allude to a few things, and if you want to hear Olivia's full story, we would love it if you go check out her first episode. I'm sure we'll cover some bits and pieces starting right now. The question I wanted to pose to you that I did not ask you last time is, let's say we look at life as a book. And every day that you're alive is a page of that story. What do you think is one of the more important pages that the audience needs to know about to understand who is sitting across from me this afternoon?
Wow, what a question. Whew. Starting with a banger here. I really like how I could segue this into the privilege through adversity, because I think that one of the most important things to maybe understand about the hero's journey that I have been on is the recognition of the importance that challenges and adversity play in our life, and how each moment in my life that has literally acted as a current to take me from one chapter of my life into the next has been the ability to recognize how privileged I am to have experienced the adversity that I have been through. Does that answer your question, or should we dive deeper?
That does answer my question. Before we dive deeper, I had a question I forgot to ask you. I'm going to backpedal real quick if that's okay.
Perfect.
During your introduction, there is some things that I brought up, such as psychedelic integration. And I believe that right now, there are some audience members who are already thinking about turning this off. So for anyone, I'll use my mom as an example because she won't mind. My mom raised us in a house where all drugs are bad. And when I call her up this afternoon and told her I had an episode about psychedelic integration, she's probably going to be like, what is Texas doing to you? So for the audience members like my mom who are already thinking about turning this off as soon as they heard the intro, what would the encouragement be that you'd give them to go ahead and give us a shot? Why should they stick around for the next hour or so and listen to what we have to say?
So I think growth mindset is one of the most important attributes that we can have to make it through this life. You know, life could feel like anything from Hunger Games to a romantic comedy to a drama to a thriller, to a horror movie. And I think the one thing that we can fortify ourselves with that give us the best chance of making it through in a way that is not only just surviving but thriving is to have a growth mindset. The ability to understand that we are not fixed human beings and we have the capacity to change and grow and to literally shift out of any pattern in our life. And when we think about what a growth mindset is, it's the ability to understand that there is another way of doing things. There's another way of seeing things. And so kind of leaving the door open to possibilities, trusting yourself that you can rely on your own discernment and intuition to know if something is right for you or not right for you. So if you could momentarily let go of any constraints or constructs that you might have blocking you off to listening to certain things, and see if you can take a breath into trusting yourself to know that if this is something that's right for you, you'll know. And if it's not, then it's not for you. Just like you would turn on a movie and see if there's something interesting, something that you can learn from. And if not, it's okay.
Yeah, I love that. With that being said, do you have anyone that you hope this podcast reaches?
I hope that this podcast reaches anybody who may be going through a tough time, who may be feeling stuck, who may have experienced some adversity in their life that they're not quite sure how to process and are needing maybe some understanding or some tools to be able to get through that. I hope it reaches the curious mind, because curiosity is my favorite virtue besides courage. A lot of C virtues in my life. So anyone who loves a good story.
Excellent. Well, let's go ahead and dive into it.
Cool.
Starting with, I'm going to butcher the phrasing. You just said it 2 minutes ago.
Privilege through adversity pathway.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Yes, and so not to recap my entire life, but I'll use my story as a way to explain this framework. So this is actually a framework that I use with most of my clients and the people that I work with, because it was something that this framework changed my life. But first of all, I want to talk about the power of paradox and the importance of being able to hold two things in your hand at one time. So we'll start there, and I may have touched on this in the other podcast as well, but basically understanding the paradox that on the one hand, I was born and raised a missionary, and on the other hand, I was born and raised in an infamous religious sex cult. Both are true, but it's about understanding that both can be true and exist at the same time is when we begin to understand the power of paradox. And so if we can start to understand that we can hold two seemingly opposing truths in our hand at once, then we can start to grasp and understand the way that the light and the dark works in our life. We can start to remove our judgment around them. We can start removing this concept of good or evil, right or wrong. When you're walking down the street and you look behind you and you see your shadow following you, you don't attach a judgment of it being wrong or bad, right? And so that's sort of how these things work in this human experience. So it wasn't until I did my first MDMA journey that I could really look back and see with clarity the shadow of my life and the things that were harmful and the adversity that I went through. Before that, I was, under the impression that I had a leg up, that my life was great. I grew up a missionary. We got to travel, and then going through the journey and understanding, there were actually some things that happened that weren't great. So I work with two types of people. I work with one type of person, and if I'm repeating any of this from the last one, because I know that you went over it, just let me know. The type of person who was very much like me, this A-type personality, really strong, ambitious, go, 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 biohacker looking for all of the ways to like, shortcut, get ahead. Very typically with these types of people, we don't spend a lot of time ruminating and looking in the past. So it's like when we think about our childhood, it's like, oh, it's fine, it's normal. I mean, yeah, I got spanked, but so did everybody. And yeah, I didn't have this, but no big deal. So we tend to go and go and go until we just can't go anymore. We reach a point where we run out of bandwidth. And that can feel like being stuck. It can feel like hitting a wall. It can feel like burnout, where you're just like, okay, like something's got to give and I need to understand what's going on. The second type of person is the one who remembers everything that happened to them, that really stays fixated on, well, there was that time, that my mom left me. And then, my dad, he wouldn't come over when he said he was going to. And I have problems with relationships and that's because of this and that. They're very hyper aware of all the things in their life that have affected them. They kind of live in that more victim mindset. They don't have a lot of agency and they have an external locus of control where it's like everything is happening to me. Two very different types of people. Now, it's important to know that for this privilege to adversity pathway, that both of these types of people need to start at the same place. It's actually very helpful if I can draw this visual. But if you can just imagine, maybe, and so I'll hold it up because it's just going to be a line and I'll show you how it looks. So let's imagine that this is the privilege through adversity pathway. On this side, we have victim, and on this side, we have true privilege. So what I want from the two types of clients that I work with is to come over here and start at victim. Now that seems counterproductive, especially for the victim who's been in victim or seemingly in victim for most of their life. Mm-hmm. But the reason why they're stuck there is because there's a part of them that has not truly been heard, seen, or witnessed in that pain. Very often these people experience trauma at a very young age. And so that part could be nonverbal or just very young. Now, for the other person who's like, oh, everything was fine, what they're essentially doing is denying the experience that their inner child or their younger part actually had. It's like if a kid was like, hey, trying to tell you something really bad that happened to them. And you're like, oh, no, you're fine. Which is a case that a lot of people have actually experienced, either with their parents or friends or family members, where it's like, oh, no, that didn't happen. We're doing that to ourselves when we're like, no, everything is fine. So in order to really get back to that place, we have to actually step into those shoes and experience what it was like to have been a victim. And before I understood this and went through this, I had zero capacity to hold space for people in their victim. It would bring out this like jackal in me almost, where it was like weakness, I can't be around weakness. It's like if I'm fine, like, you can buck up, buck up. Yeah, exactly. And I honestly didn't really understand my reaction to that. And I didn't love it, but I was like, it is what it is, So realizing that, coming back to this place and being like, oh, well, there was the time that I actually experienced, being raped and sexual trauma, and was like spanked by many different adults, many uncles and aunts in the commune that I grew up in. And there was the time that, my mom left my older sister, and just sitting with this experience and allowing, my conscious self to advocate for those parts of me that experienced what that was, and to really like sit with that. Well, once you really do that process, and it really helps if you can have an empathetic witness kind of sit there and witness you in that and validate the experience that you went through, and not try to suppress it or shut it down or override it in any way, but tell me more. that must have been really hard. I'm so sorry. That should not have happened to you. Like really honoring the victim that was inside of you, and we all have one to varying degrees. Some people really have the golden ticket for what it means to be a victim, but there's an element of it in all of us because adversity is a part of this life that we live. So what that will start to do is it'll start to open up emotions, right? So once you get into that, well, then you start to feel things like grief and sadness. Well, I had to begin to grieve the loss of my childhood in many, many ways because I had to grow up very fast. I had to grieve the loss of like the innocent childlike days that I could have had because I learned about sex really, really young. I had to really grieve the loss of actually having a stable masculine figure in my life. So allowing that sadness to come up. Well, then after that, comes the anger and the frustration. And it's not linear in this way. And it can come, different emotions can come up. You can have access to other emotions. But the idea is that you slowly start to turn the volume up on these emotions and allow them to come out. And, there's safe ways to allow these emotions to come out. And one thing to really delineate is that there's a difference between letting your anger out on someone or your sadness and just letting it come through and move through you. There's a coach named Joe Hudson who does amazing work on emotional processing and emotional releasing, especially for men, because it's so hard for them to access these emotions. But, when he talks about grief, he's like, grief is a combination of sadness and anger. Like there's a lot in there. And he says sometimes his daughter will be throwing a temper tantrum, in the kitchen. And she's like, 4 years old. And she's like, God, she'll try to start hitting him. And he's like, honey, you can be angry all you want, but don't be angry at me. But feel your anger. And if you need to hit the ground, but don't put it on me. And I'll sit here with you as long as you want. We can, be in this anger together. And so you see how there's this like subtle difference. It's okay to be angry. It's not okay to hit me. It's not okay to throw things at me or yell at me, but it's okay to be angry. Let's be angry. So we very rarely have the opportunity to actually access these emotions in a way that it's not considered bad or deemed bad. Especially with Buddhism, anger is like the one emotion you can ever feel. So anger is a tool that has been very present in my life a lot. And so just allowing that anger to come out, the frustration, like, the anger of the injustice of what adults were doing to the children in our group, and just like feeling into that and allowing that to come up. And what I tell people is take your time. Don't rush the emotional releasing and processing process. Let it take as long as you need. Grieve as long as you need. Be sad as long as you need to be sad until you get to neutrality. So neutrality is a great place to be. What that means is that the emotional charge is no longer there. Now, there's a difference between neutrality and feeling numb and disassociated or withdrawn, like where you're like, oh, I just don't care anymore. It's not a big deal. I don't care. There's a blockage that you'll feel there. Neutrality is just like, oh, I can think back on it and it's not connecting to too much. Now, in between anger, maybe frustration, and neutrality is one I forgot to mention, which is entitlement. Entitlement is still going to be on the victim trajectory or spectrum, or on the victim side of the coin. And what that sounds like is, I can't believe that happened to me. I can't believe he did that to me. How could that have happened to me? It's like this why, which it's okay to ask that and it's okay to be there, but it's not going to get you very far because there's not a lot of answers for why. Why did that happen? There infinite reasons, or there's infinite possibilities of what we could learn from that situation, or what we can take and how we can grow from it, because that's the only thing that we have agency over. So if you're in the place of like, how could he, or why me, or like, why does this happen to me? Just be aware that it's a limiting place to be, with very few answers connected to it, because then it's like, well, why the suffering in the whole world, right? Like, why are there starving children in Africa? There's so many atrocities on earth, and staying in this place of like, why is okay, and it's not going to get us to a place where we can actually start to affect change. So neutrality comes right before the middle of this pathway, the turning point, the place where everything changes. That, I know you can't really see it that well, but it's helpful for me to be able to see it, is acceptance, radical acceptance. When you get to that place where you're like, okay, I accept everything that has happened in my life up until this point. And that acceptance is what acts like a current. So imagine if up until this point, you're kind of like hanging on to a cliff of your past and holding on to the things that have happened, and you're just kind of like there with it. Acceptance is that thing that allows you to let go.
Scary.
And right there, it is scary. It's like doing a trust fall. You're like, oh, okay, I'm just going to trust and fall back into this like stream, this river of life, where you then become a part of this cosmic choreography where everything is always happening, not to us, but for us. And so you're in this letting go, this surrender into trusting that everything is happening as it should. So you're shifting from everything is happening to me to, oh, everything is happening for me. And as you continue to go along, you move into responsibility, radical responsibility, that you are a co-creator of your life. If you are an adult, if you shifted out of that place of being the childhood victim, well, then you are now a co-creator of your life. And so not only are things happening for you, but they're happening by you and with you. So then you start to move into this place of empowerment until you get to my favorite place, which is at the end of this, which is true privilege. So when I give this presentation, I usually start by asking people, like, what is the first thing that you think when you hear the word privilege?
The thought is in my head. I just can't put it into words. When I think of privilege, let me use this podcast as an example. I feel so privileged that I get to be sitting in this seat. Like it's an honor to me to be able to sit here and talk with whoever else happens to be sitting across from me. So when I think of the word privilege, I think about all the things that have come to me in my life that I get to be a part of. Sort of where my mind went.
Yeah. Beautiful. And everybody hears something different when they hear that. But a lot of people will hear entitlement. They'll hear, socio, like, economic, disparity, being born with a golden spoon in their mouth, color of the skin, all of this stuff. And what I'm here to do is to reclaim the word privilege and what it really means. And that's why I call this true privilege. True privilege is being able to recognize that true privilege can only come as a result of the adversity that we have been through in life, because the adversity gives us and equips us with the tools we need to live a truly privileged life. Grit, resilience, gravitas, humility, compassion, empathy. And that can only come from having lived these experiences that connect us with other human beings going along the same path. It is completely the opposite of what people think, like that you were born into privilege. The people that were born into quote unquote privilege with money, that never had to worry about anything, they are usually the ones who are least equipped to handle any type of suffering or adversity in this life. And that's why so many, will end up like addicted to heroin or addicted to drugs, and they're fragile. And so once I reached this place and could look back at everything that had happened in my life, I realized how perfect everything was and how I am where I am today as a result, not in spite of, but as a result of everything that I had been through, and can stand here and recognize how truly privileged I am for everything that I have been through in my life. Now, there's one thing here, which is the cheat code, and that is gratitude. So we don't just go through this trajectory once in our life because things happen. We go through things again. Maybe we remember something that we had forgotten. So you kind of go through this cycle of like allowing these emotions to come through and to move through. But once you've done it once, it's a lot easier to recognize where you are and to start moving yourself along this trajectory. Gratitude can help you make quantum leaps through this, even through the emotions as you're feeling them. If you're tying gratitude in, it can really start to move the way that you feel inside. I am complete.
So talk to me a little bit about why TAP, and how are you using an app to take this process and hopefully spread it to as many people as possible?
Thank you. Yeah. So this is just one cognitive framework that I use to help people to understand where they are and to give them a goal of where they could be, where life is, and again, it's like, don't try to jump to this place where you look back, you're like, oh, everything was perfect, because that would also be like overriding your experience. But it's a framework that people can hold on to. So TAP is a software platform for psychedelic integration. And it's categorized into tools for mind integration, body integration, and heart integration. And then with time, we'll add on spirit. But the goal right now is to help people to get their mind, heart, and body online. And so I've separated them into categories so it makes it easy for people to understand how to integrate and what that looks like. So for the mind integration, what we have is cognitive frameworks. We have really practical ways that you can start to shift your perspective, that you can start to change the way that you see things, the way that you experience life. Because psychedelics give you such an incredible ability to rewire your neural pathways in your brain and the way that you think about things, the way that you really maximize on that neuroplasticity is by learning and understanding cognitive tools that can help you to shift, that can help you to self-resource, that can help you to self-soothe. Earlier, we were talking about how to shift out of anxiety when you're worried about something that has not yet happened, something that could potentially come. Well, what would it look like if you just shifted that thought into what you do want to have happen? If it's all fictional. Another really beautiful a concept that I tell people, which is a little freaky at first, but it's that all security is an illusion. Insurance, everything that we do in our life to try to create safety and security, it's all an illusion at the end of the day. And in an instant can all be gone. But we do so much to create this illusion of safety and security. Once you come to peace with that, you can kind of relax into the knowing that none of us are safe, but we all are, right? Because safety comes from within. So we could be in the middle of a desert, or we could be locked away in our lofty castle, or we could be, sitting in our couch or in the middle of a hurricane. and then knowing that we can be that grounded force in any type of situation kind of allows you to let go of this, like, I need to create, safety and security and make sure that I have 10 deadbolts on my door and like all, all the things that we do to try to feel safe.
Yeah. There's something I wanted to touch on real quick, and I wrote it down last night when I was re-listening to the first episode of our podcast, and at the very end of it, you had quoted Socrates, and that the highest form of human intelligence is to know yourself. And the context of the conversation was that we were talking about how to practically lovingly shining some light onto those angry, ugly parts of ourselves. And it made me think of when I was back in high school. I had a really difficult time making friends. Quick backstory, raised in a Christian school, was made fun of a lot for being gay, even though I wasn't out yet. And that was a part of myself that I hid for a long time, because if I came out, it would make everything that they said about me true. But I also was being raised in a Christian home where being gay is wrong. And so I started thinking about, how is it that I have had such an easier time making friends in Texas? And oftentimes I'll tell people, like, is it because I self-developed? Is it because people in Texas are different? I don't know. And as I listened to that last night, to that episode, I realized ever since I've been in Texas, I've been openly gay. And so because of that, something that I used to hate about myself and keep hidden in this deep, dark place is now just another part of David that I don't get afraid to talk about. And it's not my whole identity either. It's just one of many facets about who I am. And so the question I wanted to ask you is, if there is someone listening today where they are in high school David mode, where they're keeping whatever it is hidden, and it's that ugly side of themselves that they can't contend with, what are some ways that you would encourage them to gently start shedding some light on that part of themselves so they can get to a place where they accept themselves and then in turn can start to build a really healthy community around them?
Yeah, beautiful. So I think one of the best resources that we have for that is Internal Family Systems, IFS. Two books that I would recommend by Richard Schwartz, No Bad Parts and Greater Than the Sum of Our Parts. Because what you're talking about right now is parts work and parts integration. It's like there's a part of us that we haven't accepted and we don't like, but it's not all of us. And starting to understand that we are, like Carl Jung said, we are an amalgamation of all of our parts. And the more trauma and adversity you've been through, the more parts you have, the more parts that were created by your subconscious mind. So something that's really helpful. And it's interesting because parts work actually plays into the body as well. Like there's some parts of us that only show up in like a physiological response. Some people will out of nowhere start to have like a stammer or stutter. And that's like a part of them, right? That is triggered or activated in certain situations. And it's like a trauma response, but it's also considered a part. So parts work is very fascinating, but it's starting to, first of all, what it means to know yourself, like Socrates said, is to understand what those parts are. So what are the tools you need to even face and accept and see those parts? Because shame causes things to want to be hidden. It covers things, like it hides them from us, even from us and from others. And so bringing in that like light, okay, well, what is that part? Is there somebody that you can talk to? Because the greatest antidote is an empathetic witness to shame, is to be able to talk about that part with somebody and to have them hold space and witness you with that part. But then there's a whole lot of tools to integrate those parts as well. Like even just changing the way that you talk to that part of yourself, right? Because when we really start to pay attention at the way that we think about ourselves and talk about ourselves, all forms of frustration to disgust and aversion and hate for the different parts of us. And I get it, especially if it's a part that shoplifts or binges or steals or cheats, or, that's hurtful not only to yourself but to other people. There's a lot of shame, not only internally but societally, through religious constructs. There's so many different layers and constructs, right? And so those two books have some really great tools and meditations for working through these, working to really like find acceptance, going back to the privilege to adversity, finding acceptance for that part, accepting that that is a part of you. Buddhists say that all suffering comes from our inability to accept reality. Well, the reality is that you have this part. And if you're keeping yourself in comparison with people that don't have that part, it's going to be miserable, right? So coming to terms and acceptance that this is a part of you. And then one step beyond that acceptance is recognizing that that part is your ally. It's not your adversary. It is not your enemy. It's not something you have to destroy or get rid of. It's something that needs to be integrated and loved and accepted and recognized for what they're trying to do. They're trying so desperately just to keep you safe, to keep you regulated. That's how you're self-resourcing.
Yeah.
Some mechanisms and strategies are more functional than others. But at the end of the day, that's what it is. It's an adaptive strategy that we've learned somewhere to survive.
Yeah. I won't elaborate on this too much because you just covered it so well, but I'm about halfway through No Bad Parts. And in reading that, I know that there have been so many times as I've been growing up where if someone asks me if I'm dating someone, like walls immediately go up. And instead of saying like, if they say specifically like, oh, do you have a female in your life right now? A part of me will just want to say no, because I'm not really lying. There is no females in my life, but there's also a reason for that. And so as I was reading the book, I had that experience that you just described where there is this part of me that I sort of hated him. And I was like, he's just trying to protect me. That's all he's doing. And he's an ally of mine. And I really just need to have a discussion with him about this isn't your role anymore. And we don't need to defend this part of us. So what is your new role going to be? And how are we going to work together? Because you don't need to be that thing that you were in high school. We're not in high school anymore. We're not 16 anymore. We're in Texas. We're 37. You might still think we're 16, but we're not. Oh, I could ramble on that book in my experience with it for quite a long while. But I would just agree with you very much so that is a fantastic resource for people to check out.
Totally. It's so helpful. And it doesn't work for everybody. Some people's brains cannot connect to the different types of parts work in IFS, internal family systems. So for those people that I work with that are a little bit more analytical A-type personalities, I recommend whole brain living. It's scientifically backed. It's much more simple. It has to do with right brain, left brain, and the two characters that live in each side. So that's a little bit easier, more cut and dry, easier way to understand parts. If you want something a little bit more woo-woo and spiritual, I would say Teal Swan's The Completion Process is also a great parts integration resource.
Let's talk about psychedelics for a minute. Back in 3000 BCE, there was indigenous groups that there is evidence that suggests that they were using psychedelics. Same thing in ancient Greece in about 1000 BC. 1897, a German chemist isolated a certain component of a psychedelic. In the 1950s, there is a ton of research being done around it. 1966 through 1971, it started to get psychedelics they started to become criminalized. And then if you fast forward to today, to the 2020s, legalization efforts are starting to gain some traction, and it is speculated that psychedelics are increasingly seen as tools for mental health, personal growth, and spiritual exploration. So quite a journey that we've been on with psychedelics. Could you talk to me a little bit about why you integrate them, your relationship to them, anything along those lines?
I would say mainly because it was the tool that changed my life and helped me to heal from complex PTSD and I mean major dysfunction in every area of my life, socially, behaviorally, economically, and most painfully of all was relationally. Because of my childhood, we moved so much and we lived in communes, and it was like every like 6 months to a year, I'm like saying goodbye to these people that we were living with, like a family. And it's like getting like torn away from your home, from your family over and over again. And of course, like my mom really gave us these tools for resiliency and but it was tough. And I think that was my adaptive strategy, was being able to get super close to somebody and then like burning the relationship before they could leave me. I'd like find a way to like, end it. And so, I'm like in my late 20s and I've gone through so many sets of friends that at one point was like so deep and so close, and I'm just like, what happened? Why can't I keep relationships? And that was romantic, that was friendships, that was just people. And so really like wanting to understand, how to create long lasting healthy relationships in a way that wasn't so scary. And so, yeah, working with MDMA therapy, that giving me this deep understanding of my different parts, of understanding why I had this pattern, how it connected back to the life experiences that I had, and really leaning into these tools for communication, for working on relationships, for becoming vulnerable in a way that was safe or felt safe and didn't leave me open and exposed to getting hurt. And I made lots of mistakes, and it was like trial by fire. And that's how I learned all of these tools for integration. And integration is what really helped me to make the long-term changes in my life, was because I started to learn these tools and how to literally rewire my brain. I was a completely different person 6 years ago and even 3 years ago. And so it's been this like slow integration of becoming the person that maybe I always was or originally was as a small innocent child, but had to relearn how to be.
Let's say there's someone that's listening to this and their story, they can relate to your story, and so they're thinking that, maybe trying this would be good for me. How do you how should they prepare? What should they expect? And what should they do afterwards?
Well, let me go back to how I was talking about the different categories of TAP. So we have the mind, right? Those frameworks. So there's lots of like tools and resources that you can start reading and listening to. We can talk more about that, but to get your mind prepared. Then you have the body, and this works for preparation, this works for during, and this works for integration. For the body, you want tools that help you to regulate your nervous system. It is so important. Most people don't even realize that they're dysregulated. They don't realize that because they're dysregulated, they're reaching for the vape. They're reaching for, more stimulants. They're on their phone doom scrolling, and getting that dopamine hit. And it's because their body is looking to regulate. That's why they're overeating. That's why they're over drinking. That's why they're doing all of the working out all the time, and all these things that we're doing like unconsciously. We're just doing it because our body is looking for a way to regulate itself. We have a very dysregulating environment right now. It's very like there's just with all of the things going in the world, but then also, everything that's on social media and the internet. There's so many different environmental things that lead to dysregulation. And so first, just recognizing what it looks like and what it feels like when your nervous system is regulated and when it's dysregulated, and what kind of things you start doing when you're dysregulated. So finding tools, whether that be through breath work, whether that be through sound, whether that be through movement, through walking, meditation, gratitude. Find the tool that works best for you. Contrast therapy, hot, cold plunges, sauna. There's different things, and everybody's different. And everyone needs the unique thing that works for them. So getting tools for somatic experiencing and nervous system regulation. So that's going to get your body, so eating clean, exercising, all that kind of stuff, it all starts to prepare you. And then we have the heart integration and heart preparation, and that's going to lean much more. And for a lot of people, this starts to come more online after a journey. A lot of people can't access these things I'm going to talk about until afterwards, unfortunately, because our heart is our most tender and precious organ. And so it makes sense that that would be the last thing to let go of the protective walls, right? So heart is going to be everything that has to do with emotions, emotional processing, emotional releasing, relationships, relational trauma, communication. And so it's kind of understanding who the key players were in your life that may have really affected you. So having tools for processing that kind of stuff and information. So in terms of preparing, it's really getting educated first. It's like finding out, what type of facilitator you might be looking for. What is it that you are looking to work through? What is it that you're experiencing, and what are you wanting to experience? And then asking, for the people in your community, I think recommendations are really helpful. Finding somebody who's worked with somebody that that has had a good experience. It still is very much the wild, wild west, and there are people that just had one medicine experience, ranging from people who've had decades and decades in shamanic practices. So there's everything you can imagine going on right there. So I would recommend to do as much research as you can, and then start leaning into some of these tools that are available to everybody. You can find breathwork videos on YouTube that you can do, for instance.
One of my personals that you said is the sauna. I know there's some health benefits behind it, but for me, I always just feel so dang good when I get out of there. Like, yes, I love my sauna days. And walking too, especially in nature, is so helpful. Even before you came over today, I knew that going from work to this, I needed some sort of bridge in between those two things. And so I left some time for me and Thad to just head out into the woods and just walk without the phone for 20 minutes and just really allow my mind to just wander whatever direction it wanted to go. And if it was blank and I was just enjoying seeing the little guy get to chase some rabbits and get some joy out of seeing him be entertained in his natural habitat, I was like, that's all I need. I just need that moment, 20 moments to just sort of separate the two things so that I could be ready for this in a mental capacity. And it's quite helpful.
So helpful. Yeah, what brings you joy? It's hard to be in a super dysregulated state and feel joy at the same time.
Yeah.
And so if you're kind of disconnected from your body and what your body is experiencing, then try to focus on, things that make you feel good and feel relaxed, and not like you need more.
Yeah. Do you think in our lifetime we could see psychedelics legalized in the States again throughout all of them?
I do think so.
You think so?
Yes.
Yeah. You think that's far off, close? I know it's such a hard thing to predict, but
I mean, so what it looks like the who we have in the government right now seems to be pro psychedelics. I know that RFK is doing a lot of work around legalization. Here in Austin, Rick Perry He's a huge advocate. He just hosted a conference talk on Wednesday, and it was all about legalizing ibogaine. And he literally said on, I think, Joe Rogan's podcast that he's going to dedicate the rest of his life to getting it legalized, particularly for, veterans and people that need it. But psychedelics changed his life.
Yeah.
So more and more we have these big key players coming into power and talking about the importance of it.
Yeah. Real quick, before I switch gears and we sort of start wrapping this thing up, TAP, who should download it? Who is it for? Who should be on it? Talk to us about that for a minute.
So TAP works for facilitators that are working with clients, whether you are a coach, whether you facilitate any type of transformation, and you're working one-on-one. We have a back end on the software platform that has all of the tools and resources that you can carefully select for your clients. And then in terms of like the front end, the app that we have, it's TAP integration in the App Store. Whether you're just trying to add more mindful rituals into your life, maybe you're starting a microdosing protocol, or you just went to Peru and did ayahuasca, we have the tools and resources in there to help you to integrate in these different ways through the mind, the body, and the heart. And it's a very basic MVP, so there's many more features that are coming, but it works really well for you if you're working with facilitators, so that they can track your progress. And if you're just kind of self-guiding, it works as well for that.
Awesome. And for anyone that really wants to support you, one thing that I found on your website, and hopefully this is still applicable, is that for only $19 a month, you can get premium access to curated content, and 100% of your contributions go to the software development of TAP, so that you can become a founding member as well as be a part of changing people's lives.
That's right. And we have an option that's only $10 a month too.
There you go.
Yeah.
$10.
So we have a couple. So yeah, it's and that gets you connected to the community. We have different like discussion groups, book clubs. We share music, all the things that really just help you to start to rewire. I do want to touch on one last thing about the communication and the way that we're using AI in our technology, which is something I'm super excited about. And I think as
you read my mind.
Awesome
Yes,
capacity.
that was my last thing.
Yes. I believe that language is a software, right? And language has the ability to both build and create and expand, and it can also act like a virus, which corrodes and destroys. And I believe that computers were built in our likeness, and AI obviously too is being formed in our likeness as well. And what is so cool about AI is that it can help give us the right software, the right language to shift any pattern in our life. I believe we can change any pattern in our life by changing the way we communicate, the way that we communicate to ourselves, whether it be to those parts we were talking about earlier, or the way that we talk to others. And we all have those people in our life that trigger us, and that keeps us in this pattern of conflict, withdrawal, arguing. A lot of people find this type of dynamic in their family or with their romantic partners. And when you're in that, you don't have access to the right tools, the right software, the right communication to be able to shift that dynamic, because you're dysregulated. You're in this place where you just you could only revert to your default mode. Well, if you go to, let's say you're maybe you're texting with somebody and you're upset and you're irritable. Well, if you take the conversation you're having, let's say, and just use ChatGPT for right now, and you say, this is the dynamic I'm having, and this is the person I'm having it with. What I would like to communicate is this, and what I would like the outcome to be is this. Can you give me the words to say?
Whoa.
And you can go back and forth with it until it reaches the right language that resonates with the right frequency that you want to communicate. And it's oh, yeah, that's what I want to say. And by getting that objective input, you can then shift out of that pattern because that person subconsciously is expecting you to respond how you always respond.
Yeah.
They're getting some type of need met by staying in that dynamic with you, and that dynamic can no longer exist if you change. If you enter a new program into a computer, it can't stay the same. It's going to create a new program.
Yeah.
So it is a powerful tool. I'll tell you another quick anecdote about it is that I did it, I had a session with my client who works with AI a lot. And the whole journey was about the relationship that he had with his dad. He had a very tumultuous relationship with him. He was abusive. He abused them and his mom, and it was just angry. He was in his late 30s. It was close to Father's Day, and he was about to go visit his family, and he was really struggling with it. He was like, I'm just not looking forward to it. And so we did a bunch of work around his dad. I did something called perceptual positioning, where you take your own position and you just say everything you need to say to that person, either your dad, your mom, or whoever, and you just let it all out, no holds barred, knowing that like on an energetic level, that person is there present listening. And you step into their shoes, into their position, and you speak back to yourself, having just heard everything that they said, and you respond. And then you step into the third position, which is an objective bystander, just listening to both people. And then you reflect back to both of them what you heard. And that I'm guiding that person to do all three positions. So he did that with his dad. And then afterwards, I'm like, you're so good at language and learning language. Can you just see that your dad is just another language learning model that you have to learn? He's like, oh my God, that gives me a great idea. So he goes to ChatGPT and he basically has it create the archetype of his dad: Republican, conservative, closed-minded, military, racist, all the things, and he's like, and these are the hot topics. These are things we usually get into fight about. Can you pretend like you're my dad and let's have a discussion until we can reach resolution? And so he went back and forth with ChatGPT until I finally reached resolution on one of these topics. So great, right? So it worked with ChatGPT. But what happened after that is that his dad calls him the next day because it's Father's Day. And they start having a conversation, and his dad opened up and started crying. He said it was the first time he had ever seen his dad cry in 37 years, for as long as he'd been alive. And something had just shifted, because something had shifted within him and his ability to communicate with him that changed everything. So imagine if you could have that little companion with you. It's like Siri is listening to all of our conversations anyway, right? And who knows what they're doing with that information, but it's not going anywhere. I haven't seen anybody shut their phones off or their Siri, right? Imagine, if, the next time you're in a fight with your wife or your husband, and we all wish that somebody could have been there to like really tell us who was right. You have somebody there that can mediate it and be an objective listener, helping you to come back to a way of communicating that is not, that is nonviolent communication format, that has radical candor. It'll just start to change so much of the way that we relate to others and ourselves.
I want to share something with you I haven't shared with a lot of people.
Cool.
So me and my dad haven't talked in we're in 2025, 17 years maybe. We saw each other in passing for like a couple of seconds, once or twice, but I don't really count those. And for the audience, I have a friend in my life. His name is Tyler. We're workout buddies. And the other day we were working out, and Tyler says, why don't you reach out to your dad the next time you go home? And I was like, why would I do that? Like, we haven't talked in almost 20 years. I don't see the value it would bring to him. I don't see the value it would bring to me. Why did you ask me this? Why did this come up? And he's like, well, what if your mom called you like a week from now and told you that your dad had passed away? Wouldn't you want the shot of just having at least one more phone call or discussion, especially given the fact that the last time we talked, it was him calling 911 on me. So it was not a good parting of ways. And so me and Tyler talked through it for about 10 or 15 minutes. And then the following weekend, I think part of the reason he brought it up was because I was going back home to California to see my mom. And while we were at lunch one day, I told my mom, I was like, listen to this funny thing Tyler said. And she's like, well, it's really interesting you brought that up because just a week or two ago, your dad asked me, what do you think would happen if I reached out to David? And my mom told him, my dad, she said, I don't know. There's only one way to find out, and that's to reach out to David. So then I come back to Texas, and I'm telling Tyler almost in like a panic, and all of a sudden all these emotions are resurfacing. And I'm like, dude, I was like, as I have been thinking about this on the plane trip back and over the next 3 or 4 days, I think that if he was to call me within 5 minutes of the conversation starting, I would need him to apologize for calling the cops on me, or else I want nothing to do with them. That is a wrong that he needs to set right. And Tyler said, could I propose something else to you? And I said, fire away. That's why we're talking, because I value your wisdom. And he said, what if we do this, or you do this? You see your dad's calling you. You pick up the phone. Be just as courteous to him as you are with me. Make some small talk. Ask him how his year's going. And then just ask him, what's going on? What did you want to reach out for? And instead of looking for that apology, just listen to what he has to say. And if you're not ready to respond, ask him, thank you very much for the call. I need a day or two to process this. Do you mind if we go ahead and end the conversation here so I can just think on this and I'll call you back? And I said, I can do that. I could do that. And so I wanted just to bring all that up. One, because I'd be curious what's sort of going through your head right now. But two, just to thank you for giving me this resource, because this is something that is weighing on my mind right now. And I might go into ChatGPT and use this resource that I never thought of utilizing to have a conversation and to just sort of form my own thoughts for this phone call that I suspect is on its way sometime in 2025. What do you think? What's going through your mind?
That's so beautiful. It can be so hard to like see past our own pain and the pain that somebody caused us to be able to even see theirs. You know, that's what keeps us from being able to see it. And when we put them on the defensive, then we've already lost. And so Nonviolent Communication is such a great book, and I usually, every time I prompt ChatGPT, I'll ask it to give it to me with that framework. But that's what he talks about. It's like even when we're trying to tell somebody how we feel, if they start needing to go like this and justify and defend themselves, then we've lost because they can't hear what we're saying. So thinking about what the outcome is that you really want will help you understand the best way to get there.
Yeah.
And it typically comes from helping them to feel as safe as you want to feel. And guess what? It sucks that you have to think about how to do that for your dad.
Yeah.
I get it. And who do you think has more resources between them for how to facilitate a conversation like this, you or him?
I was going to say probably me.
I think so. And so the responsibility, as shitty as it is, falls on the person who's done the most work. Because you have the most resources.
Yeah.
And also holding the paradox,
Yes,
right, of
yes.
both. And you get to feel into being that hurt child that was, betrayed by his dad, and like thrown to the wolves. It probably felt like, I don't know what the whole experience was like for you, but there's deep wounding there.
Right.
And you get to have that, and you get to feel that, and you get to desire reconciliation and acknowledgement from him. And what is the best chance of that happening? How do you get there? And it's typically by allowing him to soften and bring down his, because this all goes into like bridging the generational gap, which is there's so much acknowledgement that people need from their parents. and they rarely get it because they come in like, I need you to, like acknowledge that what you did was wrong. Parents' blinders will go up immediately because they are trying so hard not to fall into a guilt and shame spiral, which for them is unfathomably painful to us. We can't even imagine what that is like to have been a parent and have gone through everything that entails. And I don't know what it was like, what your dad actually went through,
Right.
but typically for like a mom or whatever it was, to them, they're like, well, I was doing the best that I could. It's so hard for them to step into this. Oh, I fucked up and I fucked my kid up. And so instead of taking that approach, it's leaning into open-hearted curiosity. Why did you do that? Why did you call the cops? What was going on? What were you thinking?
Yeah.
You never know.
I think it was, thank you for reminding me of that, because I think it was a year or two I was talking with my brother, and he reminded me that we all learn who we are from someone. We're probably modeling it, or, whether it was someone we hated or we admired, like we became who we are through this observation process. And he's like, what could you tell me about Dad's childhood? And it stumped me for a minute, because I was like, actually nothing. I have no idea what life was like for him. I have no idea what the dynamics were between him and his siblings, what his relationship was like with his mom and dad. I know they adopted a kid. I don't know what his thoughts are about that. Maybe he hated that. Well, why did we bring another kid in? We already got 6 of them. So it is shocking how little I actually know about my father's past. All I know is the not so great relationship that we had for about 18 years. The story leading up to when I was born, I don't know a single page of it.
And this reminds me of the Rumi quote that, it's a lot of people have heard before, but, there's a field beyond where right and wrong live. I will meet you there. If we can get past this, like, right and wrong, should have done, should not have done, bad versus good, like, all of these, like, things, that these judgments that we have, we can get to the place of, oh, they're also a human having a human experience, and we're going through and experiencing something, and it really sucks that we were on the other end of that, receiving that and experiencing and being impacted by it. And there's 2 people in this equation.
This has been so much fun and so special. Thank you so much. What else did you want to talk about today? Is there anything else that we wanted to riff on for a few minutes that we haven't brought up?
I would like to just do a general shout out to any facilitators out there, anybody who is facilitating transformation for people, whether it's through psychedelics, whether it's through coaching, through sound, through movement, through breath. We are doing facilitator meetups every month here in Austin and looking to expand that. But we also have a conference coming up May 14th and 15th by facilitators for facilitators. It is not just for facilitators, though. It is for anybody who wants to come and learn these tools for themselves, for their family, for their community. So it's 2 days. It's formatted kind of just like TAP integration. So it starts with mind. So we'll have facilitators presenting on the best modalities, cognitive frameworks, how to rewire the brain. And then that'll be the first half of the day. The second half is going to be body. We'll kick that off with an immersive sound bath healing where we're bringing in a bunch of different sound healers to fill up the auditorium with bowls and gongs and flutes and just create a big sound immersion so people can drop into their body. And then we'll have breath work and all of these different tools so that you can learn how to integrate the body with these nervous system regulation tools in real time. That end of that day, we'll finish with an embodiment experience. It'll be like a dance party, but it'll be full sensory activation. So all kinds of like fun stuff to get you connected to the body. And that's going to be open to the public. And then that will segue to the next day, which will kick off with heart. And then we'll have all the facilitators talking about the best tools for relationships, communication, emotional processing, releasing. The whole thing is going to be experiential, interactive, and educational. And then the last portion of the conference will be spirit. Well, you'll learn about ego traps and pitfalls, how to build ethical, safe communities. And then the end of that day, we'll finish with a ritual theater about the story of Persephone. So we have like 17 to 20 people working on that. It's going to be epic production that's also open to the public. So you can either get the conference tickets are like $500 for both days, and that includes the 2-night events, or you can just get, a ticket to one of the night events or both.
And if someone wants to go to this, how do you happen to know
Yes.
where they can go?
The website is actevents.net.
And I'll make sure to include that in the show notes as well. So
Cool.
if you guys just want to scroll down and click on the link, it'll be there for you.
We're creating the conference that we would want to go to, like one that where your mind will just like be like, bah, bah, getting blown the whole time. And then also, if you're a facilitator and you'd like to try the app, I'd love to actually talk with you and take you through the onboarding process and share it with you what we're doing. So our website is tapintegration.com. You can also email me at olivia@tapintegration.com. And that's what's got me, what's got my heart overflowing.
Yeah. Scale 1 to 10, how excited are you about the conference?
10. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm so freaking pumped. Yeah, so we do this fundraiser for South by every year called ACT, Activating Collaborative Transformation. 100% of the proceeds go to the Center for Shamanic Education, which really works to preserve the indigenous communities, the Shipibo people, the Huichol, the Witi. And so it's this collaborative event where we bring all the change makers and visionaries from around the city and the country to come and help with us. And it's just so incredible and magical. And so we're turning that into the conference.
Awesome. I think sometimes we can get caught up in words a little bit. And so if there's someone listening and they're like, am I a facilitator? Let's say whether it's a fitness coach or another podcaster, how do you know? Am I a facilitator? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Do you feel like you are facilitating some type of a change in people, whether it's through the mind? I think that's what your podcast does. It creates shifts, cognitive shifts for people. That's a facilitator. Are you creating art, visual experience for somebody that could give them that visceral reaction of change? So many of us are facilitators, right? And we can all be facilitators, facilitating change, because we all impact each other on a day-to-day basis. Even if you're just that person. I have a dear friend who he went through a lot of trauma, and one of the worst cases of trauma I've ever heard of. And he hasn't been able to work. He hasn't been able to hold a job for most of his adult life, and he's supported by his parents, and he's in his 30s, and he's super smart, and he's had he's held jobs for briefly, but it's just been hard for him. So he holds a lot of shame about it. Like, he doesn't like to tell people that. He pretends that, he pretends that he was a successful startup founder, which he was at some point, but it's just a story that he can't really hold on to. But he has this incredible gift of showing up for people. When nobody else will show up for them, he is there. He is the person you call. He is the man in a crisis. He will be there. He will figure it out. He will jump to, he will get that shit solved. And he puts his neck out for people that the rest of the world would have given up on. And so the other day I was talking to him and I was like, if you could just come to peace with the fact that your life has so much meaning and purpose because of how you show up for people every single day, it doesn't fucking matter where your money comes from. Yeah. So many people work, they try to find service in their work, or they work so that they can maybe eventually help people, but it's like a means to the end, and he already has that end integrated into who he is every day. And it's so beautiful. And we all have that potential within us.
Yeah. Whew. What? I want to be friends with this guy.
I know. He's the best.
I want to give him a hug.
He needs it.
Yeah. Well, we talked about so much in such a short amount of time that to the audience, just to address you guys, thank you first off for being here. And to every single one of you, I hope you took a lot of things away from this podcast, but if nothing else, one thing I want you guys to hear is that if something has been on your mind, please find that empathetic, trusted source and get the words out loud. And that could be a terrifying suggestion, but I've had many moments in my life where something quite heavy has been on my mind and I have found that friend, and there's something about releasing it out of your mouth and it gets out there into earth, and immediately I feel 100 pounds have dropped off of me. And maybe speaking it out loud doesn't solve the problem, maybe it doesn't get you all the solutions, but just to be able to know that there are people in your life that love you, who will listen to you, and get some of that weight off of you so that you can start working on the little steps to find that, to get on the other side of it. I really hope that you guys can find the courage to do that for yourself,
And that you're not alone, and that you're not the only one by far.
Yeah.
There are so many more people who probably have gone through an experience and done the things that you've done too. So it's not just you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for such the perfect second anniversary episode.
Aww.
It feels wild to think we're 2 years in, but here we are. Thank you so much for being part of this journey, not once but twice. And please keep doing what you're doing, because we need it. We need community. We need to tap into the knowledge of who we are and what we want. And there's just so much that you're doing that planet Earth needs right now. And just know that you have a cheerleader in me. And if there's ever a way I can support you, please let me know.
Thank you so much, David.
You're
welcome. It's been an
welcome.
honor to be back here.
Thank you so much as well. Well, to the audience, I hope you guys have a healthy and happy Saturday night. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week for another episode on David's Saturday Night Sit Back. Bye, everyone.